And he said, "Do you really want fame and power?" And she said, "I do." And he produced a contract, and he took his finger and slashed her finger and had her sign it in her blood. And then he touched the contract and it burst into flames and the ashes fell on the floor. So pretty easy to understand what happened, right?
You don't need an advanced literary.
Right. So when you wake up from that dream and you remember it, you might take a pause and be like, I don't think that was a good thing. But what's worse is her finger was cut and the ashes were next to the bed. So she still doesn't say anything.
Not to be the devil's advocate, but I guess to be the devil's advocate. Could this girl just have been nuts, making it up, just inventing?
She could have been.
She could have, yeah.
But you have to hear the whole story.
Okay.
So within a couple of weeks, she signs this multinational tour, makes a ton of money, becomes very popular and famous on this circuit. And within a few years, she gets involved with drugs, goes to needles, gets HIV. Now she's dying in a New York hospital. And this whole thing comes back to how this started. And she calls her Filipino mother and tells her the story. And mommy calls the chancery, hysterical. I need an exorcist right away for my daughter. So Jim is the exorcist. He shows up and they tell him the whole story from the dream forward. And he says, okay, well, that's not good. You signed a blood covenant with the devil. So I'm going to need you to break that with the blood covenant. So you're going to write out the whole creed and then you're going to sign it in your blood. Well, the doctor's like, she has AIDS. She's not signing anything in blood. Not going to happen. And he says, well, then you need to step out of the room because she needs to do this. And she did do it. And she signed the contract, the creed. And within a few seconds.
The creed, for those who don't know, is I believe in God, the Father Almighty.
What we believe is as our faith.
Yes.
Yeah. The whole faith in a neat little package. And she signs it. And she convulses and flatlines and dies. So now the doctor comes back and he's really upset. The mother is out of her mind. They're all blaming the priest. Hysteria goes on for about 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden she jumps up off the table. She's back.
Oh.
And they test her. No HIV, no AIDS. She's completely healed. And so she then committed for the rest of her life to only do music that would honor God and to tell people about the reality of the devil and not to make deals with him.
What's so crazy about the story is there are so many stories that are, I had not heard that story. I'm trying to think even if I was reading some of, your writing, but wow. Hearing that, I'm struck. But then I think, well, there are all these miracles that have happened throughout history. And then what hits me is, how do people not believe in the face of all of this? Even I was just at a conference on signs and wonders. And so I was thinking of all these little coincidences, these improbable, perhaps naturally impossible things that everybody has experienced at some point in his or her life.
Yeah.
And when they strike you, you're so hit by them. And then 5 seconds later, you just go on with your life and it's as though they never happened.
Yeah.
So then I'm actually less surprised that people could hear a story like that and not believe.
I think a third of the people, if you picked up a mountain and moved it over there, a third of the people will believe right away. A third of the people will say it never happened. It was always over there. Yeah. And a third of them will be confused. And I think that's just the way human nature pans out. I've been pretty blessed in my life. I've seen so many miracles. I mean, so many that I expect them now. I used to be a contemplative hermit, just pray in the woods with a group of hermits for the most of the day. And when during that time, the Lord one day said to me, he said, the days are fast approaching when the extraordinary will seem ordinary. The extraordinary will seem ordinary, meaning like the miraculous will be so prevalent for what I'm going to do that it will start to seem ordinary. But don't ever take it ordinary because it's all grace and you have to always acknowledge it. This is a great gift. And there are just so many. I mean, even the smallest little things. Like there's a nun I'm friends with in Medjugorje, this place in Bosnia. The beautiful community called the Community of the Beatitudes. I think they have a chapter in Denver. and they were in charge of providing dessert for an orphanage. It was like 250 kids coming for a barbecue picnic thing. And the nuns were doing the dessert. And so this one nun she put in charge of the dessert got a sample pack of like 12 pudding cups, said, will this be okay? And she says, oh, yes, wonderful. Make sure we have enough. And the nun who was purchasing them got the day wrong. And she thought the barbecue was going to be the following day. And they hadn't arrived when the kids showed up. And she said, we have a big problem because, I don't have the pudding cups. She's like, well, we have all the other food. I mean, they're going to eat. But put out the 12 pack at the end of the table. And she goes, well, that's going to be terrible. Like only 12 kids will get it. And all the other kids will feel bad. She goes, just put it out. She puts it out. And all 250 kids go through. And every kid has a pudding cup. And she looks at me and she says, you know what the best part of this is? He didn't just multiply the food. He multiplied the plastic cups. And I go, sister, why is that a good thing? She goes, because we kept them. We have evidence of this miracle.
Huh.
Yeah.
What people hear these miracles and they'll sort of laugh or write it off or just dismiss them, including Christians. And I sometimes wonder, say, hold on, you believe that God the Son became incarnate and walked around and performed public miracles and then was crucified and died and was buried and on the third day rose again from the dead and sojourned on earth again for 40 days, performing so many miracles that St. John could not possibly record them all because all those books would fill up more than the entirety of the earth. But you don't believe that your car keys could have turned up in an improbable place. You don't believe that God could multiply some pudding cups. I think, where does the leap of faith jump in here? It seems they've already accepted quite a lot.
I don't know. I feel it's the new beatitude. Blessed are the unbelievers. They will not be disappointed. Because part of believing is impactful on seeing the miracle, experiencing the miracle, bringing forth the miracle. Jesus could do very little in his hometown, not because he couldn't do it, because he's bound by his own rules of providence. And so he has required that faith be part of him doing the miracles. So if you're not going to believe, you're not going to see him. Unless, he has an incredible amount of love for you to the point of like Saul of Tarsus, where he's going to force you to see.
Yeah.
Which he sometimes
you off
does.
your horse.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they'll do it.
When I was reverting after 10 years of debauchery and decadence and atheism, practical if not explicit, I had a lot of these experiences. It was a fairly lengthy intellectual process of coming to accept that God exists, and then coming to accept that Christ is who he says he is, and coming to accept that the church is what she says she is. And sort of around that point that I started to have these numinous experiences. And I thought at the time, this probably doesn't speak very well of my condition right now, that God feels the need to grab me by my shoulders, shake me or smack me in the face and say, hey, stupid, I'm here.
Yeah. But how great that he did.
Right.
Because where would we both of us be?
Yeah.
Same thing for me.
Yeah, you were not a lifelong believing, practicing Catholic.
No, I left the church for 20 years.
So you leave the church, and you were, I read, a banker in New York.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like, I don't want to besmirch all bankers, but just knowing friends who have worked in that profession, that can be a very different lifestyle, not always conducive to virtue.
No, particularly on Wall Street, around from Harry's.
Right, my old
Both
neighborhood.
know. Yeah, that's a lifestyle. It's full of drugs and money and power and all the decadencies that go with it. I watched guys cash checks for $150,000 and spend it that weekend. Rent the penthouse at the Plaza, bring in all the ladies and the booze and the drugs, and do it all over on Monday. Like, that's a lifestyle. So with that comes, with his great sin, you're going to have a lot of demons that are just hovering, pushing you to go further. But not everybody's like that. In fact, in the center of that whole community is Little Our Lady of Victory Church.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had a group there that they founded called Wall Street Young Catholics Association. So when I had my conversion, I had to dump a bunch of people in my life that weren't healthy. And I said, I got to find some good people here. So I joined the Young Wall Street. That's where I met Father Jim Labar, the exorcist.